In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to solve equations that contain decimals. Now, solving equations that have decimals in them is really no different at all than solving equations that have whole numbers and integers in it like we've solved in the past. You just simply solve that equation by forming the same inverse operations on both sides of the equation. And our goal there is to be able to isolate or to get the variable by itself. Just as a quick review, inverse operations are addition and subtraction are inverse or the opposite or undo each other in addition and subtraction, and multiplication and division undo each other or are inverse operations. Go ahead and pause the video and copy these notes into your notebook. Alright, so let's do several examples before you start doing your classwork. Alright, so for this first problem, it says to solve for W. That means that we want to get W by itself. In other words, we want to isolate W. Well, so we're going to split this equation in half by drawing a line down through the equal sign. And we look at the operation we're doing is subtraction. So the inverse operation of subtraction is simply addition. So we're going to add 5.8 to both sides of the equation. So we're going to add 5.8 on the left, which cancels this out. That cancels out because the negative 5.8 plus the positive 5.8 cancels out. We're left with W over here, and 1.2 times 5.8. If you add them, 2 plus 8 is 10. Put down the 0, carry the 1, bring your decimal point down. 1 plus 1 plus 5 is 7. So W is equal to 7.0, or just simply 7. Okay, you normally would not, if it's 7.0, you normally would not write down the 0.0 unless it specifically asks you to round your answer off to the nearest tenth place. Okay, because tenth place is the first decimal place. All right, here we're solving for x, or in other words, we're isolating x. So draw our line down through the equal sign. We're adding, so the inverse of adding is subtracting 9.15. And we're going to subtract 9.15 over on the right hand side as well. Now take a look at the 17. That's a whole number, so that's the same thing as 17.00, because we want to have the same number of decimal points, the same amount of numbers after the decimal point as we have in the 9.15. So we're going to just add zeros to it. Okay, so when we subtract the 7, borrow from that, turns into 6. The 0 turns into a 10. You borrow, becomes a 9. And this 0 becomes a 10. 10 minus 5 is 5. 9 minus 1 is 8. Bring your decimal point down, because remember we lined up our decimal points. And so 1, that becomes 16 minus 9 is 7. So this over here cancels out. And so x is equal to 7.85. If we would happen to be asked to round it to the nearest tenth, obviously remember the tenth is this place. Look to the number to the right, that's 5 or more, so that would go up. So x is equal to 7.9. That is when it's rounded to the nearest tenth. Okay, so there might be, when we multiply and divide, there's probably going to be some numbers we're going to need to round off. Usually, if the answer is 1 or 2 decimal places or so, we don't worry about rounding it. Okay. In this particular example, once again our operation is addition, so we're going to subtract 3.91. Okay, do the same thing on the right hand side, subtract 3.91. Remember the decimal point comes after the 8, so we line up the decimal places. Okay, the 3 goes underneath the 8, add the 2 zeros to the end. Okay, borrow from the 8 becomes a 7, the 0 becomes a 9, the 0 becomes a 10. 10 minus 1 is 9, 9 minus 9 is 0, and 7 minus 3 is 4, and the 2 minus 0 is 2. So we end up with, when this cancels out, we're left with k is equal to 24.09. Okay, and if we round that off, if we round it off, k would be equal to 24.1 because this 0, look to the right, that 9 is 5 or above, so that 0 goes up to a 1. Okay? In this case, it's still the same type of problem. The only difference is that the a comes second in on the left hand side. Okay, so but still this 3.52 is a positive number over here. So obviously the opposite of a positive number is a negative number. So we go minus 3.52 minus 3.52. Okay, this cancels out. We're left with a is equal to, we have to add the 0 after the 6 because we lined up the decimal points and so on. So 6 turns into a 5, 0 turns into 10, 10 minus 2 is 8, 5 minus 5 is 0, 8 minus 3 is 5, and so the answer is A is equal to 5.08, or if we're rounding it off, 5.1. Okay? And in your exercises, it will tell you whether to round off or not. Okay, if it tells you to round off, you would use this. If it does not say anything, just leave it as 5.08. All right, so in this case, remember, if it's something that looks like a fraction, that means that we are using division. Okay, so that's division. All right, and so the inverse of addition is multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by 3.9. All right, so if we have 3.9 on top and a 3.9 on the bottom, the numerator and the denominator, they cancel each other out because a number divided by itself is 1. And forgot to draw my line. Okay, so that leaves us with W is equal to 1.2 times 3.9. Now in this case, we're just going to go ahead and use a calculator. And we're going to go 1.2 times 3.9. And we end up with, our answer is 4.68. All right? Here, if we have a number and a letter side by side, that means it's multiplication. All right? And so that's multiplying. All right? So the opposite of multiplying is dividing it. So we're going to divide by 3.2, divided by 3.2. This cancels out. We're left with C is equal to 8 divided by 3.2 is equal to 2.5. Once again, this is only slightly different because here your multiplication is, this is multiplication again because it's a number and a variable side by side, but it's on the right hand side of the equation. It doesn't matter which side of the equation it's on, you still do the same thing. So we're going to divide by 1.6, we're going to divide the 4 by 1.6, the right hand side they cancel out, you're left with a C on the right hand side, and then you go 4 divided by 1.6, and you end up with 2.5 again. All right. And then our last example that we're doing, once again, it looks like a fraction, but so we know this is division. So the inverse of division is multiplication. So we're going to multiply by 2.8, multiply by 2.8. This cancels out. We're left with W is equal to 4.2 times 2.8, and we're left with 11.76. All right, so that does it for this lesson. Make sure that you have written down those notes on that first page, and make sure you ask me questions if you have any questions or if you don't understand something. And we'll talk to y'all later.